Yo, what up? This is D Knight, and you're listening to the Pardon the Insurrection podcast. My oh my, we've had so much going on. For starters, in case you missed it, we've got a new addition to the Pardon Pie family, Tara Dublin. Make sure you go follow her on Twitter at Tara Dublin Rocks. Also, pick up a copy of her book while you're at it. Make her day, The Sound of Settling. A very fun and interesting read compared to the things we talk about on this podcast. But yeah, we're heading toward the do or die time for the 2024 election. Go ahead and hit up JoeBiden.com. Get that man like $1 a month or something. Help his campaign staff up and get prepared to try and save our democracy. And make sure to grab like one other person you know and tell them about the podcast. Make sure they subscribe and tune in every single week. We got a lot of things coming up for you this year. We need all the support that we can get. So if you do your part and help us grow our audience, we'll do our part and help elect Joe Biden in 2024 and save American democracy. And this is the Pardon the Insurrection podcast.
One, two, three, four.
Hey, this is D Knight.
This is Carol.
This is Ty.
And you're listening to the Pardon the Insurrection podcast, where our president doesn't get barred for running from office because he never participated in the fucking insurrection. I know that's key. See what I did there?
Yeah, because former President Trump violated the first law of Find Out Club. You know what that is?
Don't fuck
around.
I see what you did there. But before we get to that, let's give a word to our sponsor, Sheets and Giggles. It's the holiday season. Your family, your friends, your loved ones, they deserve a wonderfully peaceful night of sleep every single night. And the only way that you can ensure that that happens is if you get them some sheets from Sheets and fucking Giggles, sheetsandgiggles.com. Get them some sheets. Make it a Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas, bitches.
Merry Christmas, bitches. Enjoy your sheets.
And there are some links in the show notes for a Pardon Pod discount if you would like to pursue that avenue and you don't want to pay full price. I get it. The sheets are kind of fucking expensive, but trust me on this, they are absolutely worth it. I got some. I sleep on them. They like magic, yo. They're like magic.
Very nice.
You know, I don't know if you've ever been to like a 5-star hotel, and they usually have some good sheets on the beds there. Sheets and Giggles is killing those. Killing them, I tell you.
Been to a 5-star.
Yes. Oh my gosh, okay. I'm so cool.
I say anyway. That I don't know if I've been to a 5-star hotel. I usually go to like 4.5-star hotels. Like, you know, those like they're upper tier hotels. They're not like the most expensive, but I do like to sleep in luxury when I travel. Anyway, sheetsandgiggles.com. Get you some sheets. You know,
you barely have time to sleep in your own bed. You work so much. When the hell are you sleeping in a foreign bed?
I'll tell you one thing. I used to fall asleep on the couch a lot. No more. Not since the sheets from Sheets and Giggles. Because I mean, like, I can't wait to get you. Look, I know a lot of people like, listen, audience, if you're listening to this podcast, I'm sure you listen to other podcasts, and I'm sure you're aware of like the hosts, they like read the ad for whatever the sponsor of the week is and like blah, blah, blah. And they don't really mean it. No, I actually sleep on these fucking sheets and they're incredible. Like, I
know what you're thinking. Carol must have spent weeks and weeks workshopping that amazing song. I know you'll never believe I just made it up.
This has turned into a Sheets and Giggles podcast where we have so many more important things to talk about. Like the fact that the Colorado Supreme Court told Trump, bitch, get your ass up out here. You are off the ballot in the 2024 election. Breaking news in case you somehow managed to miss that. Like in this case, that's why we're recording an emergency podcast, because the news is so fucking grand and game changing that we couldn't go another day without recording, because we had to get this podcast out to you. It's a Christmas fucking miracle. Colorado, you did it. Now, of course, the district court judge who initially handled this case on behalf of Crew, looking to disqualify Trump because of his actions on January 6th. That judge found that on a factual basis, Trump engaged in insurrection based on the definition of the word in Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. But that judge found that and this is going to sound fucking insane, but I think we've talked about this on the podcast before, that based on the definition of the language in the article, that Trump isn't an officer of the United States. It was just absolutely fucking bonkers. We couldn't figure out what was going on. It was like, this judge is insane. Like, of course, the president of the United States counts as an officer, at least in the context of the insurrection clause. Like, if you think about it,
he was in office. It's called the Oval Office. Like, I mean, the office of the president.
Yeah,
it's called the office of the president.
Thank you for stopping me for getting like all super rational and about to like explain like the nature of the word officer as it pertains to the United States Constitution. The nigga in office. He was in office. He's an officer. I mean, that pretty much sums it up.
And what gets me is they said that he didn't swear to uphold the Constitution. Then what the fuck?
What is like, the presidential oath?
What? Oh wait, I get it. He had his fingers crossed behind his back, so he didn't really mean it. Is that what this is?
He's a sociopath. You know, he cannot say one truthful statement, and you all should have known that his oath didn't mean anything to him.
Okay, well, that's not specifically what happened. So the president of the United States takes a slightly different oath of office than members of Congress and other federal officers do. But if you look at the wording of it, you could imply that the oath that the president takes is actually like, it's more constrained. He swears to uphold the Constitution. Like, he's literally, it's in the Constitution that the president is supposed to faithfully execute the laws of the United States. Like, I really don't understand how, like, the people who drafted the 14th Amendment, and you have to think about when the 14th Amendment was drafted. It was like after the Civil War. It was like, all right, we're going to let these southern states back into the Union. Oh, wait a second. Jefferson fucking Davis, he's probably going to run for president. We can't be having that shit, because you know what he'll do? He'll run for president, win the election, and use the powers of the office. He'll abuse the powers of the office and, like, undo everything we fought this whole fucking Civil War for.
And you know, most lawyers also have to swear to affirm the Constitution. I had to. Sorry, I was just thinking like how low the bar is. Like, you're gonna tell me the president didn't have to, and like his fucking lawyers did it, and they're still out there. Okay, anyway, that's a different matter.
Right,
his corrupt, terrible lawyers who were acting in bad faith on everything, and definitely took an oath to uphold the Constitution of the federal and their state constitution in the states in which they are barred. But
just in practical terms,
I mean, I took an oath to uphold the Constitution, like, to myself, because I'm not a traitor, you know, and I don't even have like an official government job to do. But just because I'm a good American and a good patriot, and I don't want to overthrow the government, you know, I pledge to abide by the laws of this nation.
But just in practical terms, it wouldn't make sense to pass a constitutional amendment that would bar, say, a House representative or a senator from ever holding office if they engaged in insurrection. But like the president, who has control over the entire executive branch, like, that motherfucker can do whatever he wants. Like, of course it doesn't make any fucking sense. And the judges on the Supreme Court in Colorado came to the same conclusion. And from what I understand, it was a 4-3 decision. And you can say that was a split decision, but if you look closer at some of the details that they disagreed on, two things are made obviously apparent. The 3 judges in dissent, they weren't arguing about whether or not Trump was an officer of the United States. And also they weren't arguing over the facts as to whether or not Trump engaged in insurrection. So that's not the concern. And then they did
not dissent on those points.
Those weren't like the points that they were most contentious about. It was more specifically about some Colorado state laws, but that's neither here nor there. Not the point. And I know you're thinking, if you're listening to this podcast, you're like, oh, you motherfuckers celebrate. Trump is off the ballot. Well, it's got to go to the Supreme Court. Yeah, we know, bitch.
Yeah. Which, of course, Clarence Thomas should
textualists,
recuse
right?
himself, and of course he won't.
Oh yeah,
And we're gonna see how much they're really constitutional textualists.
Well, we found that out. You know, they like to go back to the 1600s and shit when they're doing this. So God knows.
Yeah, when they overturned Roe versus Wade, Roe v. Wade, they Alito went so far back in time that he quoted some dudes out there that was like hanging women for being witches.
Yeah, yeah, like
right.
literally hanging women for being witches. Like,
yeah. Okay, let's start off with like textualism, right? All right, so there's this idea that the conservative justices on the Supreme Court are practitioners of an interpretation of federal law and constitutional law that's commonly known as textualism. They don't actually look at the principle that was behind what was intended when the law was written. They just look at the text as the basically the four corners of the text of the Constitution as it was written. And on paper, if you look at what the 14th Amendment says at this point, there's no textual basis for them to overturn what was decided by the Colorado Supreme Court. And this is pretty clear for a couple of reasons. One, mainly, it says that the remedy for anyone who's been found to have engaged in insurrection and been barred from office after having previously taken an oath to uphold the Constitution, the remedy for that is for Congress to vote to have that person's right to run for office reinstated. So if these motherfuckers who are like, oh yeah, I just like read the Constitution that was written, balls and strikes. Like if they read that fucking amendment, they're going to have a hard time bailing Trump out based on the principles that they at least proclaim to adhere to. Now, as you guys know.
Okay, you remember when they were taking heat, Alito and Thomas, for the SCOTUS being compromised, and then they made a ruling that nobody saw coming. So, a bit like it was something that.
Wait, what was the ruling?
I can't remember exactly, but I know that it had to do, I want to say, with the LGBTQ community, perhaps, but it was something that they were like, damn, we totally didn't expect them to rule this way.
Oh, so when they didn't strike down gay marriage?
Or something like that. I'm not, like I said, I don't remember exactly. So maybe with this, they'll feel like, okay, we got to throw them a bone. Because they did, after all, voted against hearing Trump's baseless claims about the election being stolen and whatever. So it's not like they will automatically rule in his favor. Thomas, okay, whatever. But the rest of the justices, I don't know. And they may decide not to take it up, which I'm hoping that they whatever.
Okay, so there was a lot in there. First of all, obviously we can't trust conservatives on the Supreme Court. Like the thing I said about textualism, it's not actually a legitimate and widely held. Widely held. Why is English so difficult when it's my first language? A widely held.
Did you go to public school?
That's half the time. A widely held legal interpretation of like how the Constitution is supposed to be viewed. It's more of like this really narrowly held set of views by conservative lawyers. We don't have time to get into that, but the point is that particular way of interpreting the law typically favors conservative viewpoints, and that they use that to get to the outcome that they generally want. But the thing is,
it's just hard for me to believe that they would go into this case that is so goes to the heart of like the principles on which the United States were founded. I don't think they're just going to be like, yep, goodbye Constitution. I mean, I know you said Roe v. Wade, but like that, it was not directly in the Constitution. There's nothing about Yeah, I guess there's a lot of, I don't know, nothing about abortion in there. I don't think they're gonna be like, insurrection is fine.
Well, here's the thing.
Constitution
So
is wrong.
the motherfuckers who are like, oh, we're textualists, we read like the four corners of the fucking document. Yeah, explain executive privilege. That shit ain't in the Constitution, and they uphold like the right of executive privilege for a president all the fucking time. That's not the point. The point
But
is,
does it say that there isn't executive privilege? There are plenty of things that aren't in the Constitution that they can rule on.
yes, like the right to access abortion, but clearly they don't give a fuck about that, nor precedent, stare decisis, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
The point is that they use what is perceived to be a legitimate form of interpretation to benefit themselves when it's convenient, and then they discard it when it's not. And this might be a particular instance where they might choose to discard it because it's not expedient for them to have Trump barred from election, even though if you read the fucking 14th Amendment, Trump is clearly disbarred from office. And you're going to say, and listen, I hear the arguments from MAGA already. I've been on the Twitter. They're going to say like, well, where was Trump convicted? Well, if you read the 14th Amendment, again, it doesn't say anything about a criminal conviction.
Just that engaged in insurrection, right?
It's the same thing as like the section of the Constitution that lists qualifications for the president and says that like no one under 35 years of age can run for the office of president. But you don't have to go to court and be criminally convicted of being 34 years old to be barred from running for office. If you're, it's like literally the same thing. There's a fact finding process. If states choose to so engage in it, and then secretaries of state, whoever controls the elections in individual states, can decide for themselves whether or not a president has engaged in insurrection. Obviously, in criminal cases, the standard for proof is beyond a reasonable doubt. This isn't a criminal case. It didn't have anything to do with Trump losing his freedom, well, per se. Again, like being barred from running for office, it's not the same thing as losing your freedom and going to prison. So I would assume,
unless that's the only way you have out of prison. But you know,
it's a different problem.
That's not really our fault.
I am interested in finding all of those people when we talk about losing our democracy that have been in my mentions talking about we're not a democracy, we're a constitutional republic.
It's a form of democracy. It's
no, but guess what this ruling was based on? The Constitution. So, yeah, those mental gymnastics are going to be interesting to hear because they've been liking to tout that we are a constitutional republic and we are a constitutional republic. Well, here we are using the Constitution as a basis to save our republic. So I'd love to see how they, I don't know, do a triple swirl off of the balance beam, or
they're not handling it well, Ty. They're not handling it well.
Of course they're not.
They're already like, oh, it's Civil War time. Civil War is trending on the internet. On Twitter.
I'm aggrieved. Things are not going well for white men. Civil War.
Yeah, well, you know, things aren't going well for one particular black individual as well. And Ty, you alluded to him earlier. He's also an issue on the Supreme Court. His name's Clarence Thomas.
I think there's more than one black individual for whom things are not going well. Derek,
who's the other one?
I just meant like specifically in reference to what we were talking about earlier. I'm sure there are a lot of black individuals who things are not going well for.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That was I guess that was not a good joke.
Well, fingers crossed, you know, with this ruling in Colorado, other states will follow suit. And like, at least, you know, myself, Ty, and other black individuals all across America won't have to worry about being deported to Africa, even though we ain't ever been there.
Well, do we get to pick the country at least? Because they seem to think Africa's one whole country, but it's not.
That's a whole nother conversation that deserves an entire podcast. about how Africa
going
is in
to
the country.
Ghana, right?
Huh?
Ty chose Ghana.
I'm actually going to go with either Tanzania or Kenya now because Ghana like kills gay people and my daughters. So,
I'm going.
Where are you going instead?
I'm going to Liberia with Josh
either
Bender.
Kenya or Tanzania. He's from Liberia, or his parents, his family.
Yeah, I'm going to Liberia with Bender because of them abs, yo. If y'all ain't seen his abs, check out his Instagram or maybe just hit the Google button, Josh Bender abs. It'll pop right up. No, I'm slightly kidding, but look, again, Trump did the other day during his rally expand his immigration deportation policy from like people coming across the southern border to like Asians and people from Africa. And you know, when he says that, he ain't talking about no actual African Americans. He means us Negroes. I ain't never been to Africa.
Yes.
My parents ain't never been to Africa. My grandparents ain't never been to Africa. My granddaddy fought in World War II, and even when he was, not World War II. I'm sorry, the Korean War. And even when he was over there, he wasn't in no Africa. My great grandparents ain't never seen no Africa. So I'm trying to send us back to Africa. Anyway,
well, he's gonna pogrom us first because he's because he talks about deportations, but then he talks about
we're going to the camps first, and then from there we'll be deported. Got it. And he did.
That's what he's gonna tell.
Well, I think that you too specifically will, probably also me, but that's because first it'll be pains in the ass. I think because you're a pain in the ass before you would be pogromed because you're black. I think.
Are you sure about that?
So, okay, I remember having a dumb conversation with someone in your tweets, D, and they were like, you Democrats are so stupid and alarmist. How do you think they're going to execute 175 million people? I'm like, that is not what is suggested when you say that someone is going to go execute his enemies. You can't execute half of the country. You need people to control. You have to control your enemies. You don't want them all dead, but you go for the loudest. Well, he's going to get his own, as you said, his own party members who doesn't disagree with him first.
Yeah, before you move on from that though, that is rather important. Like he's got to kill the people in his own party first who are against him. Otherwise, he can anyway. Continue, and that includes members of Congress and Supreme.
I'm just saying there are a lot. They need to kill enough people
to make a point.
Troublemakers
to keep the rest of us in line.
Everyone else into complying. They don't want to kill everyone. Those are sources of cheap labor.
Yeah, I'm glad you're aware of how this works.
Carol, that's what the domestic supply of kids is for.
Yeah, well, obviously, yeah, because then they'll say like, well, of course the government will take care of them in these workhouses that we've now reopened, because otherwise, how will these babies earn a living? Come on, it's science.
I totally got us off topic here. Back to our Supreme Court problem.
That was my bad.
No, it was my bad.
I was making a really lame joke where you're like, things are going really bad for one black guy, and I'm like, just one black guy?
You know what I thought about? Okay, so here's reckless speculation.
How reckless are we getting?
In a while. So my reckless speculation is that the Supreme Court is going to want Trump, that they're going to rule against Trump. And why? Is because they're going to be on his hit list because they didn't take up. Remember when he was calling them rhinos and people were drawing X's around their necks and stuff, like when they didn't take up to hear his argument? So he doesn't forget. He does not forget. Thing.
Well, here's the thing. So they recently decided to take up Jack Smith's request to hear the appeal on Trump's immunity claims. And first of all, look, this is going to take a minute, and we just don't have time to do this all in this episode of the podcast. We'll tackle it next time, I promise you. But long story short, like they really only have a couple of choices in this instance. It's either the president is immune from all crimes, or the president is immune from no crimes, or at least, outside the scope of their duties in office. And if they tried to narrow it in such a way where it only applies to this specific instance, where they let Trump off the hook and grant him immunity in this one fucking instance. I think that would do Trump. It would get Trump off of their backs temporarily. Right?
No, because look at those other bootlickers, like the Kevin McCarthy's and the Nikki Haley's.
No, I'm not saying Trump's not going to kill him, but I'm just saying, like, in the way that we interpret it, like, you know, Trump finding allies in the Supreme Court, like, it would temporarily let him look. As soon as he gets into office, once he's reelected, the first thing he's going to do is going to kill. I'm telling you this. It sounds like reckless speculation. It ain't. He's killing Congress because Congress,
except for the part about him becoming president again.
Well, that's the thing. I'm recklessly.
Yeah.
Should he find a way to finagle his way back into office, the first thing he's doing is what he did when he left office. He's going to try and kill Congress, because Congress is the only body that can have him removed from office. Like, it's fairly clear. Like, you know, if you're in office, you're basically immune from prosecution as long as you're in office. And then the only body that can remove you from office is Congress. And it takes the House to open an impeachment inquiry and to vote for articles of impeachment. So he's probably going to kill House representatives first. And then should there be enough House representatives left to vote to impeach him, he's going to kill he's going to kill the Senate. And he's probably going to kill the Supreme Court, because they're the only other check left on his power. He's going to do it. He tried to do it on January 6th. And the only reason that he called that off after hours and hours is because they couldn't find members of Congress.
So the person I was talking to did raise one interesting point, which, I mean, by the person I was talking to, I mean your Twitter follower.
The insane person that you were arguing with in my mentions, because I have a lot of those.
Yeah, one of the many of them. It's like, who would be doing it? So I guess if Trump got into office, how quickly would he be able to command the military? Or if he had some sort of paramilitary lined up, would they be able to take on the U.S. military? And could his competence allow that to happen? Like, how swiftly do you think he could really organize that? And do you think I don't think the U.S. military would get behind it, do you?
I think it would take weeks, one, because they're already working on lists of people that they're going to put in high priority positions. And then two, you don't need the entire military to stage a coup. You just need a handful of loyal people, and then you cause confusion by ordering the rest of the military to not respond to an attack on the Capitol, and then boom, Congress is dead. It don't take that long. It's pretty straightforward. You only look.
Thanks for giving them a strategy, D.
Yeah, you're welcome. I hope he's listening to the podcast and getting all his ideas for how to destroy the government, destroy the democracy from part of the insurrection. Yeah, no, it would only take a couple hundred people. A couple hundred well-armed. You know, you get a small battalion of Trump loyalists to march on the Capitol. Boom, Congress is dead. Because you saw on January 6th, right? How many hours did it take for the military to respond?
I'm too depressed to finish the rest of the episode now. Goodbye.
I'm sorry.
That concludes this episode of Pardon the Insurrection.
Recording stopped.
We're still here, I guess.
But look, it's not going to, hopefully it won't come to that. But again, back to our Clarence Thomas problem. So, you know, if you've been paying attention in the news.
Problem Thomas.
Yeah, it's just like the words are just running together because I'm so excited from the good news, even though I'm being a buzzkill. So, you know, if you're well aware of the news of, you know, the past 24 hours, Clarence Thomas basically put up a for sale sign on the Supreme Court seat. He was like, damn, I ain't making enough money. I might get up out of here. This was like 2000.
Would be a shame. Oh, nice conservative seat that you guys have.
Yeah, it'd be a shame if
something happened to it.
Yeah, right. So, and what it, you know, people are trying to make it sound like, oh, he was just asking for a raise. No, he was blackmailing Republicans to give him fucking money. And you know what happened immediately after that? A bunch of fucking wealthy Republican billionaires showed up to line his fucking pockets, as well as Alito, because they didn't want to lose their fucking majority. And by coincidence, they've hung around for 20 years and ruled some insane shit that seems to favor like Republican talking points, regardless of how, forget about precedent. As long as you line in they motherfuckers' pockets, you get the rulings you wanted. How that comes to potentially bite us in the ass here with these Trump rulings as far as immunity goes. And of course, this Colorado decision that'll get appealed to the Supreme Court. It's like you never know what the fuck Clarence Thomas is going to do because he ain't got no principles. All he responds to is paychecks. Here's the catch. Unfortunately for Clarence Thomas, this particular instance where Trump has ruled to have been found to have engaged in insurrection on January 6th, his wife is a fucking co-conspirator.
Yes, she is.
Yeah, and if there's any merit to these recent ethical guidelines passed by the Supreme Court, even though we know by the legitimate letter of the law, there is nothing to them. They're meaningless. Like the ethical guidelines are basically suggestions at best. There's no enforcement mechanism. There's no one to hold them accountable if they don't follow the guidelines. But just by it's totally obvious. Clarence Thomas should recuse himself from any decision having to do with Trump and Trump's behavior or his activities as it pertains to his attempt to overthrow the government because his wife was fucking involved. Now, clearly, again, Clarence Thomas, you can't ever count on him to do the right thing. It's unfortunately they put like the worst black person in America on the Supreme Court because that's what conservatives do, I guess. Like,
so disrespectful, man.
I mean, if you look at the worst brown people in America, Nimrod Haley is running for president as a Republican. I mean, it's just what they do.
And Vivek Ramaswamy.
Oh my!
And what that Bridget?
Jesus
Oh no,
Christ.
she's Lebanese. Bridget Gabriel. Yeah, she's brown. She's the one that got all that stuff done to her face.
Yeah, she got Michael Jackson surgery.
Yeah.
To make her look a lot more whiter than she actually is. Yeah, look, there's the running theme here. Republicans corrupt minority members of their party and use them as anyway. More importantly, Clarence Thomas can't be involved in any of these decisions. And if he doesn't recuse himself, it probably ain't looking too great. And I just hopefully the Supreme Court will do the right thing, but you can't rely on it. At the end of the day, we're likely going to have to vote for Joe Biden in 2024, regardless, because we can't necessarily count on the system to save us because the system is compromised of individuals and individuals have different motivations and respond to different stimulus the same way Clarence Thomas responds to paychecks.
I lost it for a second.
Anyway, it's still good news. Trump's off the ballot for the moment in Colorado. I mean, that decision's technically stayed until the very latest possible date when the Colorado Secretary of State has to formalize the primary ballot. Yeah, January 5th, 4th, something like that. Details.
Gonna have to move quick, and it's so sad. Those Supreme Court justices might not be able to enjoy their Christmas breaks.
They haven't recessed like Congress did. I mean,
they have, but they have
so much vacation.
They have a process for taking up expedited appeals, like the shadow docket. It's one way they can go about it, and they can take it up.
Of course, they can.
Yeah, and we don't know if they
probably have to, and then I hope it ruins some of their.
They
Christmas.
might have to. The thing is, when it comes to the factual finding, they really kind of gotta respect what happened in Colorado. They the fact finding is done. All they can do is interpret the Constitution as it applies to the facts. Now again, they can do whatever the fuck they want to because there's nobody to check them. But if they're doing their job, they really got to let this stand. And the only remedy is Congress. Anyway,
if they're doing their job, that Rubicon.
I know it's a big fucking if. That if is bigger than them lies Trump be telling. I know. I'm sorry, but
watch them just to get us a government shutdown and then be like, actually, the Supreme Court is not an essential service. They cannot work.
You
Wait,
joke.
that would keep Trump off the ballot.
You joke, but Republicans will try to defund the Supreme Court if they uphold this ruling. All right. So I talked about this yesterday. Well, I guess if you're listening to this 2 days ago on a solo pocket pardon episode of the podcast. And I'll just, for you guys' sake, I'll tell you what I think will happen should the Supreme Court decide to take any one of these avenues, and screw America by bailing out Trump. So say they take up this immunity argument and they're like, all right, well, in this one particular instance where Trump is concerned, he can't be charged with any of his actions that involve trying to overthrow the 2020 election, in whatever manner they decide to do that. And I know, like, you're thinking, well, that would be fucked up. What is Jack Smith going to do at that point? Like, he'll have to drop the indictment of Trump, clearly. But like, all right, what's plan B? Well, from what I understand, and just looking at Jack Smith, this motherfucker is always prepared. He seems to always have a contingency in place for whatever particular predictable outcome may arise from any of the moves he makes. And I think if the Supreme Court decides they want to bail Trump out, what they'll really be doing is screwing Republicans. Because if you just stop to think about it for a second, if you look at the January 6th indictment in D.C., what did Trump do? Or rather, what did Jack Smith do? He narrowed the indictment down to specifically just Trump, even though there were a number of unindicted co-conspirators who were mentioned in the indictment. And beyond that, we know of a lot more members of Congress who were involved with the same plot who weren't mentioned at all, not even as unindicted co-conspirators. And the reason why he did that is because he's looking at the 2024 election and he's like, we got to streamline this trial, get it done ASAP, and get Trump, nail his ass, and get him the fuck out of here. Well, the Supreme Court bails him out and Trump's off the list of priorities. That saves Jack Smith. He can go after everybody. He ain't got to wait. He ain't got to get Trump and then work his way back down the ladder. He can just indict all of Trump's co-conspirators, including all of the members of Congress who were actively involved in the plot. And like, trust me on this, there's a number of them. I know like the media won't talk about this, but like Trump's not the only person involved in the fake elector plot, and like no part of members of Congress, like Congress members' duties involved submitting fake electors to the National Archives in order to vote on them on January 6th. And if they say the Supreme Court decides they want to save Trump, they'll be dooming the rest of the Republican Party.
I love it.
Yeah. I mean, and again, Republicans currently have a 1-seat majority in the House. They can't afford to lose another fucking member.
That's well.
Oh shit!
According to my cards, hopefully no one dies. So
yeah, or no one gets indicted.
Well, that's gonna happen. When, I don't know, but if anyone dies between now and they reconvene, that's not gonna bode well.
Hey, this is gonna count as my closing thoughts, but remember, New Yorkers, there's a special election to replace George Santos coming up in like a week and a half.
Oh wow, that's soon.
Yeah, and it looks like you can register basically up until the day of the election, which I didn't know was a thing for New York. Okay. Special election, let's see. It will be on February 13th. So never mind, I was way off. It's not in a couple weeks. It's in like 6 weeks. February 13th, register to vote if you live in New York's U.S. Congressional District 3.
And if you don't live in New York, tell everybody you know to tell everybody they know that if they live in New York to register to vote.
Or if you're Casey DeSantis, tell everyone from out of state to come and vote.
All right, it's time for our Shithole of the Week award. I'm hereby officially nominating on Todd's behalf Greg Abbott because of this immigration law that Texas recently passed and Abbott signed off on, and this is like it's not funny, but it's funny, making it a criminal offense to enter the state illegally, even though it's already illegal to do that. But this law, he can basically totally ignore due process, and anyone suspected of being a legal immigrant, he can have them deported from the state, if not the country.
So it's not stop and frisk, it's stop and deport, basically.
Yep, stop and deport.
For brown people.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep. It's going to be used. What I expect to happen is they're going to go after a bunch of brown people, try and have them deported, and it's not going to take very long before they accidentally, quote unquote, accidentally deport a citizen of the United States without the due process. And it's going to cause a huge state of fucking problems. And it's just funny because I was having a conversation with my mother earlier about politics, which we don't usually do. Turns out like her views on immigration lean slightly Republican, and she's not even aware of it. But I was telling her, like, you sound like the people who were trying to get Trump reelected so they can deport us back to Africa. And she's like, well, they would never deport a citizen. And I'm like,
Okay.
Yeah, you think they actually? She's like, but that would violate the Constitution. And I'm like, oh my fucking Christ.
Oh, she's so idealistic. And
wasn't
all
Trump
that.
planning, saying he wanted to get rid of birthright citizenship? He totally
Yes.
was. And like revoke he was going to revoke citizenships of people.
I think that's his way of getting rid of Melania not having to pay that prenup.
Well, all right.
Personally.
Two things. I hereby award Greg Abbott the Shithole of the Week award. I think it's got to be.
Even though he had a Lifetime Achievement Award.
I feel like that's at least his third time. So he's definitely hereby he's barred from running for the Shithole of the Week award, but he is now eligible for the Shithole of the Year award. Tune in for the next episode of Pardon the Insurrection for that. And two, like, and Ty, I'm sorry to cut you off here. We'll get your closing thoughts on another episode. But, you know, my mother's black. She's been in America. She was born here. You know, she grew up in the civil rights era. When she went to school as a child, she couldn't even go to school with white kids. That's the time that she grew up in. And even this fucking insane disinformation that they propagate nonstop on the right, it even worked on her. So you got to be fucking diligent about this shit, because it's fucking insidious. And that concludes this episode of Pardon the Insurrection.